You're the coach of the U.S. women's national team. And when you go to a tournament, there is the expectation that you are going to win it. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking, those cheating Canadians, platoon, Olympic soccer nuttiness going on, Emma, Leagues Cup, coaching the U.S. men's national team, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Wednesday, July 24th in the year 2024?
I'm doing well. We are back to Kyla producing today. I think what we've settled on is Sean will do Mondays, Kyla will do Wednesdays, and then eventually we'll choose one or the other. It's a bit like Brady Henson, Sims Hostetler. We have a great producer debate going on here.
It is very much of a reality show, survival type of thing. And, may the best man or woman win going forward. And Kyla obviously had a hell of a summer and really increased her stock. I want to speak for you, but certainly the way she looks now relative to the beginning of the summer. We always knew that she was awesome, and then she just proved it this summer. So, Sean's got to be quickening his shoes, right?
Absolutely.
What do you got for me, my friend? Did you watch anything or see anything, or what's going on?
The only new thing I've got is I listened to this 6-part podcast documentary about the Bernard Goetz incident.
Bernie Goetz, yeah.
You remember that?
Of course.
New York City, December of 1984. Fascinating case that still reverberates today. This guy who on a subway in New York City shot 4 black teens that we thought were going to rob him, but there's not clear evidence that was the case. And it was during a time where crime was very high in New York City, so it triggered all sorts of debate about crime and vigilantes and how much citizens are allowed to do in self-defense. And so very well done, the documentary, very interesting stuff.
Podcast documentary is what you
Yes.
think? Okay, cool. I will check that out. Yeah, I remember it vividly because, to your point, there was a lot of controversy and conversation as to was he in the right, wasn't he in the right, and all that kind of stuff. So I will check that out. I only have one thing, and I just came across it, as I'm sure people out there in these days where we have so many different platforms out there as you're scrolling and trying to find something. And let's be honest, sometimes we're scraping the bottom of the barrel in some of these platforms out there. There was a day, remember, maybe back before COVID and then into COVID, where there was so much stuff and there was always something that you could find. And now there's not a whole lot. Anyway, over there on the Amazon machine, the 2018 documentary called Brothers in Arms, and it's a documentary on the making of Platoon. I don't know if you ever saw Platoon, did you?
Sure.
All right, 1986, Oliver Stone ended up winning Academy Awards, and it's the making of Platoon, and it's a war movie, and it just has an incredible cast of a lot of what were going to be really famous types of actors, and some of that had already started to be the likes of Charlie Sheen and Willem Dafoe and Tom Berenger and Kevin Dillon, Corey Glover, who's actually the lead singer of let's see here, Cult of Personality. But he's also an actor, and he was in that. Johnny Depp. Forrest Whitaker was in it, but he wasn't in this documentary. John McGinley, who I think is a really, really good actor, Living Color, by the way, the band that Corey Glover fronted. I thought it was really well done. Charlie Sheen narrates it, as he also does the actual Platoon movie. And the interviews that they get are just amazing. Forrest Whitaker, while he was in the movie, he wasn't in the documentary. But the most interesting part was how in this movie, where they are a platoon, they came together weeks beforehand, and trained as a platoon, and how the relationships formed and the camaraderie and all that. And then, they're filming a movie where people, unfortunately, are depicted dying. And as they would die off, they would then leave this group and be put on a plane and go away. Anyway, I thought it was really, really well done and gave you a whole nother layer and glimpse into what was a really, really powerful type of movie as a lot of Oliver Stone movies are. So I recommend that. Brothers in Arms over there. You got
Oliver
else?
Stone, he has a directorial run from 86 to 91 that's unmatched. He did Salvador, Platoon, Wall Street, Born on the 4th of July, JFK. Now, I think it's been pretty spotty since then, but that 5 or 6 year run, I mean, Wall Street and JFK might be two of my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
They are telling stories, Oliver Stone stories, and I'm sure every cast that has ever worked with Oliver Stone probably has their stories. I mean, they're telling stories at one point where he's having them do a scene, and they don't find out until after that there's no film even in the camera. And he would say stuff to poke and to provoke because he likes confrontation. And he likes confrontation in the human sense, going back and forth because of what it produces in an emotional sense for the actors. And so, some of these actors in this because Oliver Stone did not participate in the documentary, but some of these actors loved it and really kind of appreciated it, maybe after the fact. And some of them were like, this is ridiculous and this was unnecessary. But, some of the greats, that's kind of how they work in terms of being the provocateurs, even in that situation, because they feel that's what gets the best. And as a lot of directors, there's an eccentricity about them, multiple takes on one line, and you just got to go crazy after a while. But anyway, it was interesting. All right, should we light this candle, my friend?
Let's do it.
All right, we're coming to you, as we mentioned, on Wednesday, July 24th. The Olympics have kicked off. Opening ceremonies are on Friday, but the Olympics have kicked off. And as is the case a lot of times, some sports, and most often soccer, kicks off days before the actual opening ceremonies, as is the case here. U.S. Men played today. U.S. women played tomorrow. We are coming to you, like I said, right after the U.S. men playing France. Is that where we'll start here?
Yes, a disappointing start to the U.S. men's first Olympic campaign since 2008. They suffered a 3-0 defeat to host France in Marseille. All 3 goals in the second half. Alexander Lacazette, Michael Olise, and Loic Bade with the goals. You could argue the scoreline is a bit harsh. The U.S. hit the post twice in the second half with Mihailovic and Tolkin, but nevertheless, 3-0 is 3-0. Disappointing.
All that matters is the score, Mosse. But I will say this. In looking at this group, as we mentioned, first game against France, second game against New Zealand, and third game against Guinea, you take your chances against France, and first half was actually pretty good. And they had a couple of opportunities, but I don't think ultimately, in looking at this game, anybody was going to mistake the U.S. for an elite team. And France was certainly the better team throughout the game and ultimately scored the goals that they needed. But if you had told me before the tournament the U.S. was going to lose to the hosts, and by the way, the hosts that are France and one of the great teams with all of the talent that they have and the value associated, everybody did the kind of the value determination between the two teams, and what France was worth on the field and what the U.S. was worth. And to no surprise, they're an incredibly valuable team, incredibly talented team. But if you had told me that the U.S. was going to lose to France, you said, all right, fine, because the U.S. needs to get their points in these next 2 games against New Zealand in the next game and then Guinea. So yes, there's moments that you can take, but again, I think the moral victory type of posture that has served us well over the years, I'm done with it. I don't care. I didn't come out of this game thinking that any of these players here on this field really shone, and I didn't come out of this game worry that the sky is falling. This is a loss to France, and France is a better team.
At halftime, when it was 0-0, I thought we were going to bump up against the inherent difficulty in analyzing youth tournaments. Is it about the result, or is it about the individual performances? Because had the second half gone the way of the first half, and the game ended 0-0, a lot of people would have said, well, that's fine. They drew France. No problems there. But the U.S. didn't do a whole lot in the first half. They were just sort of defending, so there wasn't an opportunity for any attacking players to really stand out. So would you have been satisfied with that? I guess it raises this larger question of through what lens are you judging this tournament?
As I told you before, I don't care ultimately about the Olympics relative to soccer, except for the fact that it can produce players that are going to possibly be a part of 2026. So it's all through the lens of 2026. And nothing that I saw on the field here today makes me believe that any of these players are going to star or feature, let alone even make the team come 2026.
And frankly, I don't even care about the overage guys. Mihailovic a little bit more than Miles and Walker. But
yeah, some of these guys have been around.
Those two guys, to me, have reached I know what you are point. Mihailovic maybe not to quite the same degree as the other two, so I still care about him. But I'm really looking at guys like Tanner Tessman, who I thought had some good moments, Duncan McGuire up top, Paredes, Aronson. So it's really the under 23 guys that you're zeroing in on.
And when you look at the full U.S. men's national team in the context of watching this team, okay, so you have Matt Turner, who I think is vulnerable in a way that we haven't seen him over the last few years, in that I think that if someone were to come along and kind of pull a Matt Turner on a Matt Turner, you could do that. So there's a question in goal. I think there's a question on the back line when it comes to center backs. And notwithstanding, Scally over there and the Dest injury, I think that there's a possibility over on that right-hand side. When you come into the midfield, if Weston McKennie isn't doing it and others aren't there, okay, so maybe there's an opportunity for someone to come in there. And then obviously up top in terms of a 9 position, a striker position, that is the evergreen type of position that is open right now. But I didn't see anything that makes me believe, again, that any of these players are going to take those types of positions.
Tanner Tessman is the one guy I have my eye on in this tournament. And also at club level, it looks like that Inter Milan deal might not go through, but the mere fact that a club like Inter Milan was interested in him, we'll see what kind of move he does get if he leaves Venezia this summer. But he's a guy that I could see developing in the next couple of years and challenging the likes of McKennie and Musa for a starting spot in 2026. But beyond that, I agree with you. I didn't see much else today that I would look at through that lens.
And again, then there's the part of the competition, right? And so, yeah, I'm looking at it in terms of 2026. But now you have your 2 games where you would certainly look at this, even this U.S. team right now, as at the very least equal, but I would argue better than the other 2 teams in your group. And so you got to find a way to get your 6 points there.
And New Zealand beat Guinea in the other game in the group 2-1, and that's
so
who the U.S. plays next on Saturday. Elsewhere in men's Olympic soccer, listen, you and I have been around a long time. We've seen a lot of things. I don't think I've ever seen what happened with Morocco and Argentina today. For those of you that missed it, Morocco jumped out to a 2-0 lead early in the second half, both goals by Rahimi. And then Giuliano Simeone, the son of Diego Simeone, pulled one back, 2-1. We then played 15 minutes of second half stoppage time at the tail end of it. Argentina equalized, a sequence that began with some great work by Thiago Amada, crazy goal line scramble. Eventually, Christian Medina nods it home. The Morocco fans were not happy. They started throwing objects on the field. Some supporters stormed the pitch. The players left. And it seemed to everyone like that meant the game was over, 2-2 the final. We then come to find out that A, the game wasn't over. It had merely been suspended. And B, the Argentina equalizer was under review for a possible offsides. They eventually brought the players back out an hour and a half or so after they had left. They did chalk off the Argentina goal. Amioni was found to be offsides in the buildup. And then behind closed doors, because all the fans had left by that point, we started the matchup again with Morocco up 2-1, played 3 minutes. Morocco held on, so they win. Have you ever seen anything like that, Alexi Lalas?
No. This was insane. And, Olympic soccer turned to Copa America and said, hold my beer on basically the first day of competition. And so I guess the only redeeming part in this is that when all is said and done, after all the craziness, they actually got the call right. Okay. And so I guess we can fall on that. But, I was watching the game and, over there on the Peacock network and all that kind of stuff. And to your point, Argentina scores at the end, just a bananas, bonkers type of play. They hit the crossbar twice, and then ultimately it went in. And so they think, oh, we finally came back from 2-0 deficit. And also, it should be noted that the Moroccan fans, until the end, were awesome. And it was a full Moroccan type of situation going there. And on the field, the team was really good. So just in terms of a result, Morocco beating Argentina would have been something big, although we've talked about Morocco now for a number of cycles and what they're doing, men's and women's, and what that country is putting into their team. So it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise. But then they score 2-2, and the feed ends right as the Argentinian players are getting pelted by everything from the stands. And then they left the field. And to your point, I thought it was it. I moved on to another game, and I pulled up some other game, and then I started getting messages. And over there on the X machine, you started seeing people that are saying, "No, the game's not over. It was not stopped," which was insane. And then the whole VAR type of situation. So then they said they were coming back on to warm up, only to have the referee at that point do the VAR move, go over and check it out and call the goal back. Where did the 15 minutes come from in terms of injury time? And to you said 15 minutes. They actually ended up scoring in the 16th minute.
Yeah, that's where I want to go here because I have a major issue with this. We covered the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, which is when this all started. And most people seem to be in favor of it because everyone had bought into the fact that time wasting was this existential crisis and we need to start assessing the proper stoppage time. But we've gone too far in the other direction. Referees now feel this license to throw up any crazy number. Yes, Morocco did their fair share of time wasting in the second half. There's no world in which it was 15 minutes. And I'm sorry, we've talked about this before on this pod. There has to be a better way to do this. The ambiguity as to when a game is going to end. My non-soccer fan friends, this is the thing that they're most confused by with this sport, and I don't have a good answer because there's no other sport like this. We have to figure out a better way to assess time at the end of the game. We've talked about this, maybe stop the clock. Yeah.
Stop time. That's the only thing that you could possibly do, and that exists in other sports. It's a little more difficult when you understand. Well, everybody understands because you guys listen and watch. You watch the game, but the dark arts, if you will, and the time wasting that goes on, and the fainting, and the reality of soccer is, so when do you stop and start? If you're going to do stop time, and for those that don't know, obviously stop time is you're literally when the ball's in play or when the ball's not in play, you're starting and stopping, and that's easier said than done. But if you were to do that, when do you actually stop? And if a player is rolling around, is said player actually wasting time and therefore you should stop? Or you only have it going when the ball is literally in play? So every time it goes out for a throw-in, you stop. Every time, but I think you could find a way to do that. But then are you doing start, stop time? And again, counting down, which has been done in the past, including in MLS years and years ago, or are you still going up and then stopping it at 45? I don't know, but it came from a good place, Mosse, right? The additional time now, but it has gotten to a point now where I don't know where the calculation is coming from, and these numbers just go up there, and you're looking around going, really? That's what they got? But I don't think it's malicious from these referees. I think many of them believe this is ultimately what we have lost.
And we should note the backdrop to this match. After the Copa America final, there was a video that surfaced of Argentina's players in the team bus singing a racist song directed at French players of African heritage. So there was some tension in the air today. They were facing Morocco in France. The fans booed the Argentinian national anthem at the start. So that might have contributed to what happened at the end of the game. There was a generally tense atmosphere in the air, given the context surrounding these two teams.
All right, so right now we could just kind of stop this segment, and when it comes to Olympic craziness, but there's more, right?
Yes. One final thing, by the way, the U.S. is crisscrossed. The U.S. group is crisscrossed with Argentina's group. So that Morocco-Argentina result does have some U.S. implications, potentially, if the U.S. can figure out a way to get out of their group. It would impact who they would face in the quarterfinals. So something to keep an eye on. And I do want to say, before we move off the men, Mexico, who have a very good pedigree at the Olympic level, bronze medal at the last Olympics, gold medal in 2012, beat Brazil in the final at Wembley. They did not qualify. The Dominican Republic is the other CONCACAF representative. They began their campaign with a 0-0 draw against Egypt, which was cool to see.
Well done.
But we transition to the women, and before we get to the U.S., there's a crazy story on the women's side as well. Canada are the reigning gold medal winners. They begin their campaign tomorrow against New Zealand, and they have been caught spying on New Zealand's training sessions with a drone. 2 assistants have been sent home, and their head coach, Bev Priestman, will not manage in tomorrow's game. The Canada Federation put out a statement, very embarrassed by what happened. FIFA launching an investigation. How about that? The Canadians are very sneaky. This is shades of Spygate with the Patriots, the Astros controversy. And I'll stop there. I can't think of any college football incident recently that would make for a good reference.
You might want to stop and let me take it from here over there, you Wolverine, you. This is insane. Okay. Uh, and you don't be fooled by all the nice Canadian talk and the our friends from the Great White North. They can cheat with the best of them. But the problem is they're cheating when it wasn't necessary. This is New Zealand, right? Is this who they were spying on?
Correct.
Oh, come on. Come on, Canada. You're better than that. Or I guess you're not better than that. And it was done by a drone, so the technology. And in this day and age, okay, I get it. You're trying to get any type of advantage. But first off, it's cheating. I do think when it comes to the Olympics, whether it's right or not, right or wrong, the Olympics kind of have a underlying morality that's maybe different than other tournaments. And so I think that's why there's a lot that look at this and say this is beyond the pale for anybody. And for Canada right now, they're going to pay the price. And right now we've heard that New Zealand is asking them to forfeit the game and give them the points and do all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's dumb. And they've sent the coaches home. And now Bev is going to miss that first game. And it's not a way that if you're Canada, you want to start off a tournament. And this is still, the Canadian women's national team, which has certainly been successful over the years and is looking to have a successful one. And, the players probably have no idea and have no connection to this, except they're going to be ultimately tainted because they're going to be looked at least through this tournament, as cheaters. And not only that, but as stupid cheaters. If you're going to cheat, at least be smart about it. And they weren't even smart about it in terms of who they decided to cheat on here with New Zealand. So again, just day after day when it comes to the Olympics, there seems to be something ridiculous and yes, interesting in terms of the content that it gives us here. But man, oh man, this is insane.
So I mentioned that Canada won the gold medal at the last Olympics. The U.S. had to settle for the bronze, and then Spain won the last World Cup. The U.S. crashed out in the round of 16. A lot of U.S. fans hoping that the arrival of Emma Hayes will help the U.S. Move up, back to the top of the sport. But Emma had some interesting comments on the eve of her first tournament as U.S. coach. She said, I think one of the biggest problems is that too often we keep talking about what we're going to do in Paris or what happens when we get to the semis or the final. I think it's disrespectful to the rest of the world to talk like that, and I think the game has moved to a point where that isn't the case. It isn't a shoo-in to get somewhere. It has to be earned, and there's no given right when women's football is developed the way it has across the world, that there are top football nations in this tournament, and any given day, any opponent can beat anyone. I do believe that. I don't think shocks in the women's game exist anymore. I think we have to reframe our focus a little bit and have respect for the rest of the world.
Okay. This is not the first time that Emma has kind of talked about this, and the narrative right now and the way that it is being framed is that, she's really realistic and she's finally, saying what needs to be said. And this, American exceptionalism and the hubris that comes along with being so good for so long. We got taken down a peg or two last summer in the Women's World Cup, and now she's here to give us a dose of reality in that the rest of the world has caught up and in many instances maybe passed. All right. So first off, we don't need Emma to tell us that. We all understand that. However, Emma, you're the coach of the U.S. women's national team. Okay. So all of that history, and whether you want to call it hubris or anything like that, at least there are wins and consistent wins and success to fall on. It's not just us saying that we are good. We have been good. We have been good for a long time. I get it that you want to lower expectations, but guess what? You don't get to do that. Even if you're Emma Hayes, you're the coach of the U.S. women's national team. And when you go to a tournament, there is the expectation that you are going to win it in the same way that a Brazil or an Argentina on the men's side, obviously, or even in England. And I'm not talking about unrealistic expectations. And so when she says these things, I know on the surface, you look at it as, hey, it's a breath of fresh air, and she's telling us what we really need to know. But this doesn't absolve her responsibility, and this doesn't mean that we're not going to have the same expectations of doing well in a tournament. And so I get I get the icky feeling that she's kind of setting it up for less than stellar types of performances when it comes to the Olympics. Emma, you were hired to win with this team. Again, when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, nobody gives a crap how they win. They just want them to win because they, for a long time, have been the best in the world. And the Olympics, as opposed to the men's game, are as important. They're not more important, but in many cases, people look at them as important as the World Cup. I still think the World Cup is more important, and I can certainly make that case. And if I'm looking between these Olympics this summer and the World Cup 3 years from now, obviously the World Cup is the most important thing. But you don't get to make excuses because you're going through a transition period. You don't get to make excuses because you have, thinned the herd and you have moved on. And while this may be a transitional type of moment for this team that is necessary, that doesn't diminish the expectations. That doesn't mean that we are going to expect less from you and this team going forward.
I agree with you. I think she's not reading the room. The fact that the women's game is more competitive and that other countries have caught up to the U.S. is something that's been discussed ad nauseum the last few years. Everybody is aware of that. And I think what U.S. fans are looking for is for a coach that's going to bring that swagger back. I would have rather Emma channeled her Jose Mourinho and walked in and said, you know what? Bring on Spain. We're still the U.S. We're the only 4-time World Cup winners, and our goal is to win the gold medal. And so this was a weird discourse for me. I think she's telling everybody something that, to your point, they don't need to be reminded of. It's something that we've all been discussing the last couple of years, especially in the wake of that disastrous World Cup campaign.
Yep. I mean, we're paying her a boatload of money. Not we, I'm not, but the U.S. Soccer Federation is paying her a boatload of money to win, not to tell us that the rest of the world has caught up because they've actually put resources. We can all see that. You don't need to pay anybody for that. We all understand that and know that. All right. So anyway, the Olympics on and off the field have kicked off and are giving us just amazing
things. Can I
things.
just say, as you know, I'm a Francophile. I love Paris.
Yes.
I cannot wait for this opening ceremony on Friday. It's not going to be at the Olympic Stadium. It's going to be in the Seine. The athletes are going to be riding boats down the river. They're going to go past Notre Dame and the Louvre and Pont Neuf, and it's going to end at the Place du Trocadero near the Eiffel Tower, which was our home base 2019 for the Women's World Cup. LeBron James and Coco Gauff are going to be the two flag bearers for the U.S. delegation.
Okay.
Did I read somewhere Snoop Dogg is involved?
So when you listen to the NBC promos, it's like Mike Tirico and Snoop Dogg and who are the other people that are going to be there? I can't remember who they were talking about, but it was just this weird eclectic group, and I think that's what they're going for. Now they're coming down the Seine. There's been a lot of talk about the cleanliness or lack of cleanliness when it comes to that water. So just hopefully everybody stays in the boats and it all works out. But I think it has the potential to be something really epic and beautiful, to your point, in that city. Where they all float down, and that it's not in a stadium, I think is actually going to be kind of cool.
You know, Landon Donovan took a lot of shots for being boring this summer. I do have to say, on the excitement scale, Tim Howard made Landon Donovan look like Dick Vitale today.
Damn,
Timmy needs to.
Wow, it's
I couldn't even hear him half the time.
Listen, I know I was listening too, and it was I know it's sometimes hard when you are studio, and I'm certainly I've done plenty of games, but studio. And transitioning back and forth between studio and, color analysis for games like that. But as I've said before, if you're not excited, why should the audience feel excited? So that's how he wants to roll. And maybe it's a slow burn. Maybe he's going to gear up as we get through the tournament.
Now, I shouldn't talk. I got slapped down by Aaron Schechter a moment ago for not talking into the microphone enough during this segment.
I mean, you'd think we've done this pod enough where you understand the technical, decisions and what you have to do in order to, get heard, my friend.
I am battling a bit of a cold, as you can tell. I'm going to call this my Pippen back game.
Okay, but you're okay.
Referencing. The reference everybody always makes is the Jordan flu game.
The flu game, right?
And Scottie Pippen, who's has this feud now with Michael Jordan the last few years. He didn't like the way he was depicted in the Last Dance documentary. There's also some interesting family entanglements between those two. He came out and said, my back was hurting during that game. Why does nobody talk about the Pippen back game? So now I'm going to start referencing whenever I'm sick and playing in pain, I'm going to say it's the Pippen back game.
Stop complaining. You're going to be fine. You're sounding like Emma. All right, here we go. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we got some interesting U.S.-Mexico talk. Ooh, some Leagues Cup, all sorts of stuff. So don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. Let's have some USA-Mexico talk and a little look forward to this Leagues Cup that is coming again for its second year, Mosse. U.S.-Mexico, always talk on and off the field of what's going on. Where do you want to take this?
Well, we mentioned in the previous segment that the U.S. began its Olympic campaign with a 3-0 defeat to host France. One of the most notable omissions from that squad is RSL playmaker Diego Luna. He was not included in the 18. They did want to take him as an alternate, and he turned that down. And he gave an interview where he explained his reasons why, and then went on to say that he hasn't closed the door on playing for Mexico instead of the U.S. Luna, born in California, but eligible for Mexico through his parents. He's represented the U.S. at various youth levels, made his senior debut earlier this year in a friendly against Slovenia, having a very good season for RSL, 5 goals and 12 assists in MLS, helping RSL reach near the top of the Western Conference. He's part of the All-Star team that, by the time you hear this podcast, will have faced League MX. So what do you make of this story? Diego Luna considering switching allegiance to Mexico.
Okay, there's a part of me that just says, okay, then go to Mexico. And I know, there are dual and sometimes even triple national players that have these options. But I look at it as such a different type of situation as opposed to a club situation. I look at it, you are representing a country, and I think that there is something special. And you have to feel something for that. You cannot be a mercenary. I'm not saying that there aren't mercenaries. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of them, especially in this day and age, and there have been in the past. But I think that will manifest, and I think that will come and bite you in the butt. So, pick where you want to go. And I get it. There's players that say, I have a better chance of playing internationally if I'm going to this team as opposed to this team. And that you have options, well done, that you have options. But ultimately, you have to go where... I like to think that you're going where your heart leads you, but I get that there's a pragmatic approach in terms of if it's not happening in one place, maybe you have a better chance here. Diego Luna, I think, is a really interesting player. I like him as a player. Does it mean that he should have been on this team or he should be with the national team program? Yeah, maybe not. I mean, and he's a different type of player. It's interesting. Do you see the Freddie Adu X earlier about the types of players that we have? Here, I'll read it to you here. Let's see. Freddie Adu said, being fascinated with the big, strong, fast athlete and not actual soccer players and the way our youth system is set up will always be a huge reason why we are where we are in international soccer. This has to change for us to be consistently competitive. All right, so first off, Freddie, if we were only concerned with big, strong, fast athletes, you never would have been heard from. Okay, so I don't necessarily think that is the case. But if you do look at the best teams in the world, they are very big, they are very strong, and they are very fast. And I'm not saying that someone like Diego Luna or Freddie Adu shouldn't be looked at and can't do good things, but I'm okay with Diego Luna. He's not slipping through the cracks, Mosse. I don't think that this ultimately is changing the trajectory of American soccer going forward.
No, I agree. It's just, we're used to Mexican-American players being torn and having divided loyalties. And I think U.S. fans recognize that there's a win-some, lose-some element to that. But it just feels a bit petty on his part coming off this Olympic snub. And now he's going to talk about playing for Mexico. Had he been chosen as one of the 18 for the Olympics, he would have been all in with the U.S. So the timing is just rubs some people the wrong way.
I'm okay with that. I mean, you do what you need to do for you. And, again, we have had over the years players that have had this tug of war, either that they've manufactured or it's just kind of happened. And sometimes we never hear from them again. So, and the angst in the American soccer community when we potentially or ultimately do quote unquote lose a player to another national team, especially when it comes to the Mexican national team setup. I get it, but this is 2024 and there will be more going forward. And I can't waste my bandwidth, if you will, constantly worrying about it. And it doesn't mean that you don't, as a coach or as a GM and anybody working in the federation, it doesn't mean that you aren't getting in front of these players and not pleading your case, but laying out your case and saying, this is why we think that you have a potential. You don't guarantee anything. And if you do, you're going to run into big problems. But you do have to, recruit, if you will, and sell one program over another. But only to a certain extent. There comes a point where you say, you know what? If this isn't something that you feel that you want to do, if this isn't something that you feel inside, it doesn't matter how you can kick the ball. I want you to feel something special for the team that you ultimately choose.
So the U.S. and Mexico battling for players off the field, and it looks like they're going to meet again on the field. This is not official yet, but there are reports that Mexico and the U.S. will play a friendly in October in Guadalajara, which is unusual because most of the U.S.-Mexico friendlies are in the United States. And, it may seem counterintuitive given that the World Cup is in the United States to suggest that as preparation for that tournament, the U.S. could benefit from playing games outside of the U.S. But a lot of fans seem to be making that point, and I actually agree that this group needs to be toughened up a bit. And since they're not going to get to play away to Mexico in qualifying, it might not be the worst thing to play a friendly away to Mexico.
Yeah, the irony is that for many teams, they want to get the lay of the land here in the U.S. And for the U.S., because we're not going through qualifying, to your point, I think it actually benefits us. And depending on where you go, but certainly playing against Mexico in Mexico is a very different proposition, even in this moment right now where the pendulum has swung, I think, much more towards the U.S. And you're looking at an El Tri team that it's not great. I still think this is a much better type of environment and experience for this national team going forward. And again, it's beggars can't be choosers. And there's slim pickings when it comes to who we can play, and obviously the environments that we can play. So I think this is the best possible scenario for the U.S. in this moment.
And we got an AskAlexi question on the last pod about who's in better shape for 2026, the U.S., Mexico, or Canada. There's going to be a little round robin between the three teams here because in the September window, the U.S. plays Canada, Canada plays Mexico, and then in October, the U.S. plays Mexico.
Okay, speaking of Mexico, what's going on?
One last point before we move on.
Oh, you got something else? All right.
Yeah, I was thinking about this from Jesse Marsh's perspective. 1 win in 8 games as Canada coach. Now, you can point to the difficulty in opponents. They've played the Netherlands, France, Argentina twice, Uruguay. And you can also point to the fact that they got to the semifinals of the Copa America. So most people, I think, correctly so, are choosing to take a glass half full view of his start so far. However, it's 1 win in 8 games, and now in the September window, they're going to play the U.S. at Children's Mercy Park and then Mexico at AT&T Stadium. They could very well lose those 2 games, and then it would be 1 win in 10 with losses to the other 2 teams in CONCACAF. So by September of this year, the narrative could have completely changed, and everybody could be taking a step back and saying, has this actually been a good start for Jesse Marsh on the Canada bench?
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. All that matters is the tournaments, okay? And to go back to what we were talking about in the previous segment about Emma, it doesn't matter. You can win this game or that game, but ultimately, if you do well in tournaments, that is going to be your legacy.
So back to the U.S. and Mexico. They obviously both fired their coaches after crashing out in the group stage of the Copa America. The U.S. yet to hire a replacement. Mexico, we know it's going to be Javier Aguirra with Rafa Marquez as an assistant, and there are reports that Javier Aguirra is going to recall some of the players that were controversially left out of the Copa America squad, most notably Chucky Lozano, Memo, Ochoa. This got me thinking about the U.S. because most of the time when a national team has a giant failure, the fans are convinced it's because they had the wrong players on the field, either because the coach didn't call up the right players or chose the wrong lineup. So a new coach that comes in can curry favor right away by shaking things up and putting different players on the field. But whoever takes over for the U.S., I feel like that wasn't the criticism with Greg Berhalter. Everybody was generally happy with his last squad list and with the starting lineups in the Copa America. They just feel like he didn't get enough out of the players. So it creates a somewhat odd dynamic for the new coach coming in because I think he's basically going to end up calling up a very similar squad and playing very similar lineups.
Yeah, if you think back over the last couple of years, the only real, point of conflict or disagreement would have been like a Brandon Vasquez type of thing. Why isn't he in with the team? But to your point, very, very few people said, "Oh, it's a horrible roster that he has." This is ultimately who who this is the group, and this goes back to Mosse. When it comes to the U.S. men's national team coach, there's not a bunch of players waiting in the wings. So you're going to have to find someone that's going to do more with the players that you have, or if you're a Javier Aguierra, to bring back into the fold maybe some that they had thought they were going to move away from.
Chucky, I think it makes sense to bring back. To me, that was a mistake by Jimmy Lozano. I know Chucky has struggled of late, and Mexico struggled, so they felt like they need to shake things up. But Chucky was somebody that I still viewed as a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Yep. Frankly, the other names on this list that are mentioned in this article do nothing for me. That's not going to change Mexico's fortunes at all. Jesus Gallardo and Henry Martin and guys like that. So to me, they have a talent pool problem there. It wasn't a coaching selection problem for the most part.
All right, let's move on to Leagues Cup.
Yes, we mentioned in our last pod that the Leagues Cup kicks off on Friday. Remember, it's 47 teams in total, 29 for MLS, 18 for Liga MX. Club America and Columbus get a bye into the round of 32. The other 45 are divided into 15 groups of 3. The top 2 in each group advance, which gives you 30 plus the other 2. And then it's knockout stages from there, round of 32 on. A couple of big picture questions with this competition before we dig into the teams. We know the MLS tried to back out of the U.S. Open Cup, supposedly because of fixture congestion, but then they're holding this Leagues Cup. A lot of fans still salty about that. You mentioned the Austin supporters group protesting. There are others that have joined that mix. And so this U.S. Open Cup versus Leagues Cup, very much a debate that's in the air right now.
It is. And, I mentioned in the previous pod that, supporters groups, they're so important in terms of fostering, the atmosphere, and they kind of dictate what characteristic and personality your team in that environment during the 90 minutes, but also day to day takes. And each one is different and unique and distinct and wonderful in that sense. And at times, they want to be heard and they want to be seen. There's a discussion over there on the X machine, and I'll give this young man, I think he's a young man, Eric Goodman over there on the X machine, making a really interesting point. He said, this is asinine. Open Cup, U.S. Open Cup, hasn't done in 100 years what Leagues Cup did in 1 year to elevate MLS and soccer in America writ large. Tradition for tradition's sake isn't just boring, it's bad business. If anything, MLS should be celebrated for finding creative ways to progress. I think he hits it on the head here, okay? And it's not that people don't enjoy and love the Open Cup, and there's a romantic aspect to it. And when you actually look at the realities of what it is and what it isn't, it doesn't always look as golden. And it also brings up a fundamental question of what are the responsibilities of leagues and teams. In this case, it would be MLS to the Open Cups of a country. But as I mentioned before, the protests that are happening right now when it comes to supporters groups relative to this Leagues Cup, if that's the way you want to spend your time and your resources, and that's the way that you want to try to be heard, okay. But, in doing so, what you're saying is nothing new can happen. Every single cup at some point was the creation of somebody and something. And I know there are people that are listening right now and say, yes, but an Open Cup, the significance and the importance of it is that it was the creation of something that was open to all. I get that. But ultimately, when it comes to cups being successful and people coming to games and people watching and people caring and being relevant, to Eric's point over here, the Leagues Cup hit it out of the park in that first year. Now, we'll see what happens this year. Second year in, and obviously Messi was a huge part of last year in terms of kicking it off, and now he's not even on the field because he's injured, and so we'll see ultimately what happens here. But I get these supporters groups wanting to make a point and have at it, if you will, but maybe there's some other things out there that you could use to make your point here, as opposed to Leagues Cup, which has so far been very, very successful. And in terms of the benefit and the progress and the evolution and the growth of soccer, I think you can certainly look to something like this and say, hey, this is a plus. This has been a positive relative to stuff that has been done in the past.
Second
anyway,
debate is between the Leagues Cup and the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and to what degree does Leagues Cup actually serve as any kind of barometer of the strength of the two leagues? Last year, MLS clubs dominated 6 of the 8 quarterfinalists, or from MLS, 3 of the 4 semifinalists, and both finalists. Inter Miami beat Nashville to win the title. The Mexican teams complained afterwards that, the timing, it's early in their season, they're not in tip-top shape yet, but their bigger issue was the travel, the fact that all the games are in the U.S. and they have to do a lot more travel in the MLS teams. Don Garber said holding Leagues Cup games in Mexico as a non-starter, he wants to distinguish this tournament from CONCACAF Champions Cup and make it all in the U.S. or Canada. But they did try to remedy the travel issue in the way they scheduled some of the games to kind of reduce how much traveling that Liga MX teams are going to have to do. Nevertheless, Mexican teams continue to dominate the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We covered that competition earlier this year. Pachuca beat Columbus in the final to win it. So they point to that as that's a competition where, because it's home and away, that's the true measuring stick. And what do you think? How do you weigh these two competitions as far as measuring sticks between the two leagues?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to use it, and that's okay, but it is not a fair representation because of the travel and because of the home element of Major League Soccer teams. And if ultimately, as Don Garber said, okay, that's not what the tournament was meant to be, and that's not what it is going to be. And so if that's how they're going to approach it, then you don't get, as MLS, to then tout when your MLS teams win and do well against these Mexican teams that you are better. You can't have it both ways.
And we're taping this on Wednesday afternoon. Did I see that Liga MX won the skills challenge last night?
I watched a bunch of it. It actually was interesting and it was fun. Yeah, I think they ultimately won.
That to me is the ultimate barometer between the two leagues. Whoever wins the skills challenge.
Hey, I will. Speaking of Don Garber, when I was watching the MLS All-Star Game festivities and the skills challenge and everything, you were hard pressed to find a domestic American Canadian player in the skills challenge. And while from a business perspective, you just want the best possible soccer, but if ultimately, to Don Garber, he wants this league, when I'm talking about Major League Soccer, to be a league of choice, it has to be a league of choice not only of players coming in from the outside, but also players on the inside. So I just thought that was interesting to see that there are less and less players when it comes to stars in Major League Soccer that are homegrown, that are from the U.S. and or Canada. When it comes to whether it's the All-Star Game or anything else out there. So that's going to be something going forward to look at.
As to the Leagues Cup itself, we kick off with 5 games on Friday. Just 2 of them are MLS versus Liga MX. We have Pumas versus Austin and LAFC against Tijuana. Some notes on the Mexican teams. Monterrey are in a group with Austin and Pumas. Brandon Vasquez not off to a great start in the Apertura. He's now a sub and has yet to register a goal or assist in 4 games. So the bloom is off the rose a little bit for him there. However, Cade Cowell off to an incredible start. 3 goals and 2 assists in Chivas' first 4 games. That's a fun group in the Leagues Cup. Chivas, the Galaxy, and San Jose.
Ooh.
So we'll get some fun games there. Leon signed Andres Guardado, but he picked up what looks to be a serious injury. So who knows if he's going to play? I guess probably not. Speaking of that, we know the defending champions, Inter Miami, they're in a group with Puebla and Tigres. We'll see about Messi. He was a star of Leagues Cup last year. Is he going to play at all in that competition this year? How many games? And then Pachuca, who I just mentioned, they're your CONCACAF Champions Cup winners. They're in a group with Toronto and the Red Bulls. That could be fun. Cruz Azul are in a group with Charlotte and Philadelphia. They signed Giacomakis from Atlanta, and he's off to a pretty good start to life in Mexico. So
obviously a lot of connections, which is something that Don Garber and MLS and Liga MX have cultivated. And as there's more crisscrossing of players being sold and being brought in, these types of like I said, these types of connections and these types of histories that we have are going to become more and more. And I think that that's something that this tournament and this partnership with Liga MX wants to foster and wants to continue, because, as we said before, MLS needs Liga MX and Liga MX needs MLS, and they would not come here and they would not participate if I'm talking about Liga MX, if they did not see an advantage and if they did not see opportunities and positives from participating in this. So they can complain all they want about the travel and we're not playing at home and all that kind of stuff. But if the players have a problem with it, go talk to their ownership over there at Liga MX. What else, Mosse? Anything else?
That is it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, it's time for AskAlexi and One for the Road. So don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. It's time for AskAlexi and One for the Road. Speaking of AskAlexi, if you want to send in your comments, questions, and concerns, you can do that over the social media platforms out there. And keep in mind that our handle is SOTU with Alexi. Or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. Mosse, what do the people want to know this show?
First up, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen right now.
Hey guys, it's Chris from Mississippi. My question has to do with the U.S. men's national team Olympic team. Alexi, having been there, how does the older players being picked for the team, what is their mindset going into this? Is it do they feel slighted or should they feel elated about it, or somewhere in between? Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Chris from Mississippi. Yeah, it's interesting. And, my experience was in obviously a different century and obviously a different time. When so in 1996, I was part of the Olympic team and I was one of the 3 overage players. It was myself, Claudio Reyna, and Casey Keller, if I remember correctly. And there wasn't kind of an alternative in that it wasn't an either or type of situation. If I was playing with the national team, I was playing with the national team, and this was kind of a separate thing. And it certainly wasn't viewed back then as a demotion, if you will. So, but we're looking at a situation right now when it comes to the players, your Walker Zimmermans and your Miles Robinsons, that they're not starting or playing for the full national team. And so this is kind of, I guess, a step down. I don't think that any of the players, the over 23 players on this team, would ever approach it like that or think about it like that. I think they look at it as, from a Walker Zimmerman perspective, he's had his moment, right? The guy played in a World Cup. And this is kind of gravy and an opportunity, again, to go to an Olympics. And the way that we as Americans think about Olympics, even in the soccer context, is just very different than the rest of the world. And so there's still, I think, an incredible honor in doing that. And I would expect anybody that's the over 23 players, even in this day and age, to feel that sense of honor and responsibility and opportunity to kind of do this and check this one off the off the box. I will say that, and I think I've mentioned this before to you, Mosse, but when I look back on, I played in the 92 Olympics, and that was when it was just under 23. And then I played in the 1996 Olympics, and that was when it changed to 3 overage players. As I said, I was one of those. It was an incubator for the national team. If you look at the 92 Olympic team, I think 7 players that hadn't played on the national team before, the full national team, matriculated up to the full national team 2 years later in 1994. Like guys like myself, Kobe Jones, Brad Friedel, Mike Lapper, Mike Burns, Joe Max Moore, the list goes, Kobe Jones, I mentioned, the list goes on and on. So 7 of them. And then I was looking today, of the players that played in 1996, a bunch also went on. Now, not guys like myself and Casey and Claudio, who were already on the full national team, but guys like Eddie Pope, guys like, let's see here, Frankie Haydick. We know those were 2 big stars when it came to following up next World Cups. Brian Mazanoff, who was part of the 98 team. So, again, it was still an incubator for that next version of the national team coming in the World Cup. And again, as you're watching this Olympic team right now, I don't know how many of the players are going to even participate. But to your point, Chris, yeah, I'm not worried about the mindset of the overage players when it comes to participating. I think that they recognize this is an opportunity for them. And who knows, maybe they look at it as my last opportunity to do something big in a big tournament.
Brazil take the Olympics seriously, which makes it even more embarrassing that we couldn't qualify. But Romario, I remember 2 Olympics in a row, 96 and 2000. He campaigned very hard to be taken as one of the overage players, didn't get picked for either one, and he was furious. So not only would he not have felt slighted by going, he very much wanted to go and was really upset that he didn't get picked.
Oh, my goodness. What else we got?
Next up, question on X. Steve Malanga asks, have we gone from 2026 will be a great opportunity to grow the game in the U.S. to let's not embarrass ourselves in 2026?
Oh, my goodness. Steve, I understand why you are asking this, and I understand that there is this sentiment out there after the epic failure that was the summer of 2024 at the Copa America, which resulted in not just the firing of Greg Berhalter, but also a reexamination of where we are. And, maybe a reality check for everybody as to maybe we're not as far along as we thought we were going to be. Having said that, I am the eternal optimist. I still remain bullish about what potentially could happen in 2026. I don't think that we are at a point where let's not embarrass ourselves come 2026. I do think that whoever ultimately is hired as the coach, I think that there will be a coming together, the likes of which we haven't seen, and there will be some, arms folded, but I think in general there will be an excitement and a positivity towards what is to come. And yes, it has to be proven ultimately on the field, starting this September when they start to play games. But I feel that the American soccer community, they want to embrace somebody. They want to follow somebody. They want somebody to make them and us, because I'm part of it too, us believe in this team. And I think that will happen. So I think that no matter what, I think now and certainly going forward into 2026, that for me at least, it is 2026 will be a great opportunity to grow the game in the U.S. And I think for those that are in a dark place right now, saying, "Oh, let's just not embarrass ourselves," I think you'll come out of that. I will help pull you out of that. Again, not in a Pollyanna way, and not in a delusional type of way, but providing you what I feel are reasons why you should be positive, why you should be bullish, and why you should be excited that come the summer of 2026, on the field, we are going to maximize the opportunity. And off the field, we are going to maximize the opportunity so that many, many years from now, when I'm no longer around, people are going to look back at the summer of 2026 and said, yeah, that was another seminal moment. And fundamentally, the game changed in the country because of the things that happened on and off the field. So that's my pitch to you, in that things aren't as dark as they may seem to some out there.
We have a bonus one.
Oh, okay. What do you got?
In our previous segment, you read a X post by Freddie Adu in which he lamented the U.S.'s obsession with big athletic players rather than valuing skill. He then doubled down on that. He went on to say, if Messi was American with the same talent level, I am not sure I would be confident enough to say he would have been given the same chances he got in both Argentina and Barcelona due to the fact that he was very small, Modric being the other.
See, the irony of Freddie's comments here, and by the way, he's a great follow, and he's really making some really interesting comments here. I don't agree with them, but at least he's being interesting when he is saying stuff. The irony is that Freddie Adu's time was around about the time that U.S. soccer actually focused in on these tweeners of players that didn't really play a position. And we were so concerned that players, because they weren't big, strong, fast, were falling through the cracks, that anybody that could trap a ball and anybody that showed any type of technique that was above and beyond what they had seen before, automatically we identified them. And we nurtured them and we coddled them. And so I don't necessarily agree with what Freddie is saying here when it comes to Messi, especially in that moment that happened to produce the likes of, I don't know, Freddie Adu or Kyle Martino, or the list goes on and on and on, that not big, strong, fast players, but actually, quote unquote, better soccer players. But in our zeal to find these quote unquote better soccer players, we forgot that nothing can replace speed. Nothing can replace strength. Nothing can replace power. And if you look at some of the great teams in the world, they have not only the technical skill, but they combine it with a physical prowess that is an unbeatable type of situation. So I don't know. If Messi was American with the same talent, he's not as confident they would have given him the same chances. Well, first off, America, the pathways and the climate and the landscape are completely different than what happened in Argentina. And Messi grew up in an incubator. Messi grew up in the warm cocoon, ultimately, of La Masia. So he was identified earlier and had those opportunities.
Incidentally, Sean Sullivan reached out to Freddie Adu about appearing on this pod and got turned down. So we can add Freddie to the list of Christian Pulisic,
Freddie's
Megan Rapinoe,
not doing press,
David
evidently.
Beckham.
Yeah.
We are going to start having Kyla make these calls because it's clearly not working with Sean Sullivan.
Freddie's not doing press, but he's just spitting off hot takes when it comes to the X machine. So good for him. I like the fact that he has an opinion. I like that he's not afraid to express it. Again, whether I disagree or agree is irrelevant. At least it's interesting, and I will read it. And thanks for the content, Freddie. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's move on to the end of our show and one for the road. Roll it, roll the van, if you will. There it is. There we're running around here. Oh, my goodness. All right. So I have gotten questions over the years, especially when it comes to social media and in person and everything like that. Well, would you coach? Well, I have never coached, and I'm not sure that in my future that is ever going to be something that is going to happen. If I felt the burning desire and need to coach, I would move heaven and earth and do everything in my power to make that happen. I got a question the other day about, would you accept the U.S. men's national team coaching job? I'm going to preface this by saying that there's not a chance in hell that would ever happen. But if you're asking me that question, absolutely. I would consider it an honor. I would consider it a privilege. I would consider it a duty if somebody came to me and said, hey, we would like you to coach the men's national team. So much so, Mosse, that I would do it for free. That's how much this national team means to me. That's how much I respect the position. And I'm telling you right now, while it will never, ever happen, I'd be awesome, okay? I truly believe that I would give this team what it needs in this particular moment. I would give this position of head coach what it needs right now. And certainly you would have nobody that is more positive and, I guess, outgoing when it comes to promoting this team, promoting 2026, and believing in American soccer and what it can be done. And I would obviously lean into that. I would, let's see, I would look at this team from a practical perspective, and I would say, this is not a democracy. I would say that nobody's job is safe, but I would also reinforce the fact that they have an incredible opportunity with 2026 to do something that is bigger than them, that is bigger than fame, that is bigger than money, that's bigger than anything, because ultimately it's legacy. And I would make sure that they understood that, hey, that's something that they will never take away. And many, many years from now, when we're no longer on this earth, you can do things that are going to last and are going to be remembered. And that, my friend, is of value. And don't ever waste that opportunity. So anyway, that's my one for the road. I recognize that would never happen, Mosse, but if it were to happen, that would be my response.
What do you suppose Eric Winaldo's reaction would be if you were hired as U.S. men's national team coach?
Yeah. I think he and many others would not take kindly to something like that happening because, to be fair, whether it's Eric or others, they have coached, they have done different things. I will say that, and this isn't me, I do think that, and we said this before when it comes to soccer coaches out there, and X's and O's and all that kind of thing, especially for a national team, the motivation and the mentality and all that kind of stuff. I think that there is a lot of that, and maybe even more so when it comes to the international game that you need to focus in on, and you need to motivate, and you need to know when to kick somebody in the ass and when to pat somebody on the back. And I guess that applies to a lot of different sports, but you have so little time with the players that you almost need to dumb it down and make it as simple as possible. And I think that as we've tried to grow and progress and evolve as a national team, sometimes we made it more complex and we have complicated things. And so if I was in that position, I would try to make it simple, and I would try to make it easy to understand in terms of what the expectations are individually and collectively what we are going to do. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we've, kept it to, an hour here, around about an hour. We've tried to. I have my stopwatch here that I'm trying to figure out. Keep downloading, keep reviewing, keep subscribing and doing all the different things you do out there on all the different platforms that we have. Keep pounding on that subscription button, all right? Smash it, people. Double fisting, smash the subscription button. We're getting huge numbers. It's just been a wonderful summer, and we're not going to look back. We're appreciative, but we want to go forward. We want to continue to grow the pod and to grow our little family here when it comes to the State of the Union, but we don't do that without all of your help and your continued help. So whether you're just coming to us recently or whether you've been around for years and years, thank you very much. Onward and upward for everybody. All right, Mosse and I will be back next week with more shows and all sorts of soccer that's coming. As we mentioned, the Olympics are off and running. Women's start tomorrow. MLS All-Star Game. We will have known what has happened with that by the time you are listening to this, but all sorts of stuff that is happening going forward when it comes to soccer. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.